I was sitting on my dock at 7 in the morning, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the water gold when I heard the diesel rumble of heavy machinery coming down my private road. My dog Rex perked up his ears, a low growl building in his throat. I squinted toward the trees that lined the entrance to my property, confusion mixing with a sudden spike of adrenaline. Nobody came down that road without permission. It was gated, locked, and clearly marked as private property. Then I saw them. A flatbed truck with a trailer, followed by 2 pickup trucks, all barreling toward my lakefront. The lead vehicle had a magnetic sign slapped on the door that read, Pinewood Springs HOA, Authorized Enforcement. My confusion turned to disbelief, then anger. I stood up, setting my coffee down carefully because my hands were already shaking with rage. Rex jumped to his feet beside me, hackles raised. I'd lived on this property for 3 years, and in all that time, I'd never had a single interaction with any HOA. Why? Because my 100-acre estate with its private 15-acre lake wasn't part of any HOA. I'd made damn sure of that when I bought the place. The trucks pulled up to my boat launch, and 6 people piled out. 5 men in work clothes and 1 woman in her late 40s, blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, wearing a cream-colored blazer that looked ridiculous for the early morning lakeside setting. She had that look. You know the one. The pursed lips, the rigid posture, the air of someone who'd never been told no in their entire adult life. I walked up from the dock, Rex at my side. "Can I help you folks?" The woman turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning. Are you Quinton Vance?" "I am, and you're trespassing on private property." Her smile didn't waver. "I'm Barbara Hendricks, president of the Pinewood Springs Homeowners Association. We're here on official HOA business to remove your boat from the lake." I blinked. Then I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You're here to do what now?" Barbara's smile finally faded, replaced by a look of stern disapproval. "Your boat, Mr. Vance. It's in violation of HOA regulations regarding watercraft storage and aesthetic standards. We've sent you 3 notices." "Lady, I don't know what you're smoking this morning, but I'm not part of your HOA. Never have been. This is private property, that's my private lake, and you need to turn around and leave. Right now." She pulled a folder from under her arm with the confidence of someone playing what they thought was a winning hand. "According to our records, all properties within a 2-mile radius of Pinewood Springs fall under HOA jurisdiction. That includes lakefront properties." "Your records are wrong." I crossed my arms. "And even if they weren't, you can't just roll up on someone's property and seize their belongings. That's called theft." One of the men, a heavy-set guy with a red face and a company polo that said Jerry's Towing, stepped forward. "Look, buddy, we're just doing our job. The HOA hired us to remove the boat. You got a problem, take it up with them." "I'm taking it up with you right now," I said, keeping my voice level even though my blood pressure was skyrocketing. "You're not touching my boat. You're going to get back in your trucks and leave my property, or I'm calling the police." Barbara's expression hardened. "Mr. Vance, the HOA has full authority to enforce community standards. Your boat is an eyesore and violates our regulations on boat covers and maintenance. If you refuse to comply, we'll have no choice but to fine you $500 per day until the violation is corrected." "Let me make this crystal clear," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. "This property, all 100 acres of it, including the entire lake and every inch of shoreline, is mine. I have the deed. I have the survey. I have the title insurance. There is no HOA covenant attached to this land. If you don't leave in the next 60 seconds, I'm calling the sheriff." Barbara's jaw tightened. "We'll see about that. Men, proceed with the removal." I hit the emergency call button as the workers moved toward my dock. "Yeah, this is Quinton Vance at 4750 Lakeview Private Road. I've got trespassers on my property attempting to steal my boat. I need a deputy out here immediately." The dispatcher's voice was calm and professional. "Are they armed, sir?" "Not that I can see, but there's 6 of them, and they're refusing to leave my property." "A unit is on the way. Stay on the line and keep your distance." I put the call on speaker and held the phone up. "Dispatch says deputies are en route. Last chance to leave before this becomes a criminal matter." Barbara's face flushed red. "This is harassment. We have every right to enforce HOA regulations." "Madam, You need to leave the property, the dispatcher's voice came through the speaker. You're currently engaged in trespassing and potentially criminal conversion. Officers are 3 minutes out. Jerry, the tow truck operator, looked at Barbara nervously. Look, lady, I'm not getting arrested for this. You said this was legit. It is legit, Barbara snapped. He's trying to intimidate us. But Jerry and his crew were already backing away from the dock. The other 2 men from the pickup trucks looked equally uncertain. One of them, younger, with a scraggly beard, said, Man, I just needed the day job. I'm out. They started heading back to their vehicles. Barbara stood her ground, her face now a deep crimson. You people are pathetic. This is exactly what's wrong with contractors today, no backbone. I heard sirens in the distance. Rex heard them too and stopped growling, sensing that backup was arriving. Barbara heard them as well, and for the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. You're making a huge mistake, she said, pointing a finger at me. The HOA will take legal action. You'll be paying attorney fees on top of your fines. I'll take my chances, I said. 2 sheriff's cruisers came down the private road, lights flashing. 4 deputies got out, hands resting casually on their belts as they took in the scene. I recognized the lead deputy, Marcus Chen. He'd been out to my property once before, when I reported some teenagers trespassing to fish in the lake without permission. Good guy, fair, professional. Mr. Vance, he said with a nod. Then he turned to Barbara and the workers. Folks, what's going on here? Barbara immediately launched into her spiel. Deputy, I'm Barbara Hendricks, president of Pinewood Springs HOA. We're here on official business to remove a boat that's in violation of community regulations. This man is interfering with our legal duties. Deputy Chen listened politely, then turned to me. Mr. Vance. These people rolled up on my private property claiming they had the right to seize my boat because of HOA regulations. I've never been part of any HOA, never received any notices from them, and I own this entire property outright. I asked them to leave multiple times. They refused. Chen looked back at Barbara. Madam, do you have documentation showing that Mr. Vance's property is subject to HOA jurisdiction? She thrust the folder at him. Right here. All properties within the 2-mile radius fall under our authority. Chen flipped through the pages, his expression neutral. After a moment, he looked up. Madam, this appears to be a map with a circle drawn on it and a list of addresses. Do you have actual recorded covenants showing that this specific property is subject to HOA rules? That's not how it works, Barbara insisted. The HOA was established in 1998 and covers the entire Pinewood Springs area. Mr. Vance, when did you purchase this property? Chen asked. 3 years ago, June 2023. I did extensive due diligence before buying. There are no HOA covenants recorded against this land. Never have been. Chen handed the folder back to Barbara. Madam, unless you have recorded legal documents showing that this property is subject to your HOA, you're trespassing. You need to leave now. This is outrageous, Barbara sputtered. We have every right. No, madam, you don't, Chen interrupted, his tone still polite but firm. This is private property. The owner has asked you to leave. I'm asking you to leave. If you refuse, I'll have to place you under arrest for criminal trespass. The color drained from Barbara's face. You can't arrest me for doing my job. Madam, final warning. Leave the property now. Jerry and his crew were already in their vehicles, engines running. The other workers had piled into the pickup trucks. Barbara stood there for another few seconds, mouth opening and closing like a fish, before she finally spun on her heel and marched to her Lexus SUV. She rolled down her window as she passed, glaring at me. This isn't over, Mr. Vance. The HOA will see you in court. Then she was gone, tires kicking up gravel as the convoy retreated back down my private road. Deputy Chen turned to me, shaking his head slightly. HOA dispute? Apparently. First I've heard of it. I'd recommend getting a property attorney, just to be safe. Document everything that happened here today. If they come back, call us immediately. Don't engage with them yourself. Appreciate it, Deputy. After the cruisers left, I stood on my dock for a long time, staring at my boat. It was a nice boat, a 24-foot bayliner I'd bought used but in good condition. Sure, the cover had a couple of small tears, but I'd planned to replace it before winter. It wasn't an eyesore by any stretch of the imagination. The audacity of these people was breathtaking. rolling up on my property with a tow truck crew to just take my stuff. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I went inside, Rex trailing behind me, and pulled up my property documents on my computer. I'd kept meticulous records. The deed clearly showed all 100 acres as a single parcel. The title search had gone back 50 years and showed no HOA covenants, easements, or restrictions of any kind, except for standard utility easements. The lake itself was entirely within my property boundaries, spring-fed, with no inlets or outlets connecting to other water systems. I'd bought the property from an old rancher named Earl Davidson, who'd owned it since the 1970s. Earl had been crystal clear that he'd never allowed the land to be subject to any HOA or other outside authority. That was one of the reasons he'd held onto it for so long. He didn't like people telling him what to do with his own land. I sent a quick email to my attorney, Richard Yang, explaining what had happened. Richard was a real estate attorney I'd used for the property purchase and a few other matters. Smart guy, detail-oriented. His response came back within an hour. That's concerning. HOAs have been getting increasingly aggressive, but they can't just manufacture jurisdiction. Let me pull the HOA's recorded documents and see what we're dealing with. Don't engage with them further without legal counsel present. The rest of the morning passed quietly. I tried to focus on work. I ran a software consulting business from home, but I kept getting distracted, looking out the window toward the road, half expecting them to come back. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number with a local area code. I answered, putting it on speaker. Hello? Mr. Vance, this is Barbara Hendricks from Pinewood Springs, HOA. Her voice was tight, controlled. I want to give you one more opportunity to comply with our regulations before we pursue legal action. Ms. Hendricks, I'm going to record this call for my records. Do you consent to being recorded? Silence. Then, fine. Yes. I hit the record button on my phone's voice memo app. Ms. Hendricks, I've reviewed my property documents with my attorney. My property is not and has never been subject to any HOA jurisdiction. I'm asking you formally to cease all contact and stay off my property. Any further trespassing will result in criminal complaints and civil action. Your property falls within our boundaries, she insisted. We have maps showing. Your maps are wrong. Do you have recorded covenants against my property, yes or no? We're in the process of updating our records. That's a no. Ms. Hendricks, I'm terminating this call. All further communication needs to go through my attorney. I gave her Richard's name and firm information, then hung up. I sent the recording to Richard immediately. 2 days later, I got a thick envelope in the mail. Return address? Pinewood Springs, HOA, with a fancy logo showing pine trees and a lake. Inside was a formal notice claiming I owed $2,500 in accumulated fines for boat storage violations, property maintenance violations, and failure to submit my property modifications, which they claimed included my dock for architectural review. The notice also included a lien filing threat if the fines weren't paid within 30 days. I photographed everything and emailed it to Richard. He called me that evening. Quinton, I've reviewed the HOA's recorded documents. Here's what's interesting. Pinewood Springs HOA was established in 1998 for a residential development about a mile from your property. The original covenants applied to 43 specific lots within that subdivision. Your property is not one of them. It's not even close. So they're just making things up? Essentially, yes. About 5 years ago, they filed an amended declaration that claimed to expand their jurisdiction to a 2-mile radius. But you can't just unilaterally expand HOA authority over properties that aren't part of the original covenant. Every property owner within the expanded area would need to agree and sign on to the covenant. Let me guess, nobody did that. Correct. I pulled property records for a dozen parcels in their claimed expanded area. None of them have HOA covenants recorded. What the Pinewood Springs HOA has done is illegal. They're attempting to enforce rules that have no legal basis. Can they file a lien? They can file anything, but it would be fraudulent. A lien requires a legal basis. They have none. If they actually file a false lien against your property, that's a crime in this state. We could pursue criminal charges and sue them for slander of title. What do you recommend? Let me send them a formal cease and desist letter. We'll lay out the legal facts and warn them about the consequences of continued harassment. If they persist, we'll file for a restraining order and potentially sue for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Do it. Richard's cease and desist letter went out the next day via certified mail and email. It was 5 pages of dense legal language that boiled down to, you have no authority, stop immediately, or face serious legal consequences. For a week, things were quiet. I started to think maybe they'd gotten the message. Then I woke up one morning to find bright orange notices stapled to trees around my property. 20 of them, maybe 30, all along the road leading to my house and around the lakefront. Each one read, Notice of HOA Violation. Property at 4750 Lakeview Private Road is in violation of Pinewood Springs HOA regulations. Fines are accruing at $500 per day. Contact HOA immediately to resolve. I called Richard immediately. Then I called the sheriff's office and filed a report for vandalism and harassment. Deputy Chen came out again, looking tired. Mr. Vance, I talked to my sergeant about this situation. The problem is, civil disputes aren't really our jurisdiction unless there's a clear crime being committed. They're trespassing on my property and vandalizing my trees, I said, pointing to the notices. I understand. We can file the report, but honestly, this is heading toward a civil court matter. You're going to need a restraining order. We're working on it. After Chen left, I spent 2 hours pulling down every single orange notice. Then I installed 6 trail cameras around my property, the kind hunters use. High resolution, motion activated with night vision. If they came back, I'd have video evidence. Richard filed for an emergency restraining order that afternoon. The hearing was set for 5 days later. In those 5 days, 3 more things happened. First, someone I had my suspicions who called the county zoning office and filed a complaint claiming I'd built my dock without permits. That triggered an inspection. The zoning inspector, a weary-looking guy named Tom Bradford, came out, looked at my dock, checked my records, which showed the dock had been permitted in 1982 when Earl first built it, and told me everything was fine. But he also mentioned that his office had received 4 different complaints about my property in the past week, all anonymous, all claiming various violations. Second, I received a letter from a law firm I'd never heard of, Blackwell & Associates, claiming to represent the Pinewood Springs HOA. The letter demanded payment of now $5,000 in fines and threatened litigation. I forwarded it to Richard, who recognized the firm. They're ambulance chasers, he told me. They take cases on contingency and hope people will settle rather than fight. Don't respond. Let me handle it. Third, and this was the one that really got under my skin, someone slashed 2 of my truck tires in the middle of the night. The trail cameras caught footage of a figure in dark clothing and a ski mask, moving quickly, but no identifying features visible. I filed another police report. Deputy Chen took the footage, but said without a clear identification, there wasn't much they could do. But you think it's connected to the HOA thing, he said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, I do. Off the record, I'd lawyer up heavy and be ready for a fight. I've seen HOA disputes before. They can get nasty. The restraining order hearing was in county court in front of Judge Patricia Morrison. I showed up with Richard. The HOA showed up with Barbara Hendricks and 3 other board members I didn't recognize, plus their attorney, a slick-looking guy in his 30s named Marcus Roth. Judge Morrison was in her 60s, gray hair, sharp eyes, and had a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. She listened as Richard presented our case, laying out the property records, the lack of HOA covenants, the trespassing incidents, and the harassment. Then Roth stood up. Your Honor, the Pinewood Springs HOA has legitimate authority over the area in question. Mr. Vance purchased his property knowing it was within the HOA's jurisdiction. Do you have recorded covenants showing that authority? Judge Morrison asked. We have our amended declaration expanding the boundaries. That's not what I asked. Do you have a recorded covenant signed by Mr. Vance or any previous property owner agreeing to HOA jurisdiction? Roth hesitated. The expansion of boundaries was properly voted on by the HOA board. Counselor, you can't vote yourself into jurisdiction over someone else's property. Do you have a signed covenant or not? Not at this time, Your Honor, but then you have no authority over Mr. Vance's property. The restraining order is granted. Pinewood Springs HOA, its board members, agents, and employees are prohibited from entering Mr. Vance's property, contacting him directly, or posting any notices on or visible from his property. Violation of this order will result in contempt charges. Furthermore, if the HOA attempts to file a lien or take any other adverse action against Mr. Vance's property, I'm directing the district attorney to investigate for fraud. She banged her gavel. Next case. Barbara looked like she'd been slapped. Roth gathered his papers quickly, muttering something to his clients. Outside the courtroom, Richard said, "That went well. But don't expect this to be over. People who get shut down in court sometimes escalate." Meaning? Meaning keep those cameras running and stay alert. 2 weeks of peace followed. I started to relax a little. Maybe they'd finally gotten the message. The restraining order was in effect. They'd been humiliated in court. Surely they'd move on to harassing someone else. I should have known better. I was working in my home office on a Thursday afternoon when I heard vehicles again. Multiple vehicles. My stomach sank. I pulled up the camera feeds on my computer. 3 trucks were parked on the public road just outside my property line, right at the gate. I could see people getting out, maybe 8 or 10 of them, some holding signs. I walked down to the gate. It was a protest. Signs reading, "Stop HOA abuse," "Property rights matter," and "HOA tyranny ends here." I recognized a few faces from the courthouse, but there were others I'd never seen before. A man in his 50s, bald with a gray beard, saw me approaching and waved. "Mr. Vance, I'm Don Carmichael. We're members of the Coalition Against HOA Overreach. We heard about your situation and wanted to show support." "Oh," I said, surprised. "I appreciate that, but I'm not sure a protest is necessary." "It's not just about you," said a woman next to him, probably late 40s with short dark hair. "I'm Jennifer Watts. Pinewood Springs HOA has been trying to strong-arm properties on the edge of their development for years. They pulled the same thing with me 2 years ago, claimed my property was under their jurisdiction, cost me $15,000 in legal fees to fight them off." "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. They're predatory. They target properties with lake access or other desirable features, claim jurisdiction, and then either try to extract fines or force the owners to sell at a loss. We've documented at least 8 cases in the past 5 years. Don handed me a folder. "This is everything we've compiled. Court cases, complaints to the State Real Estate Commission, everything. We've been trying to get the state legislature to pass stronger laws limiting HOA authority, but it's slow going." I flipped through the folder. Case after case of similar situations. Properties suddenly claimed by HOAs that had no legal authority. Harassment campaigns, false liens. In one case, an HOA had actually filed a lawsuit to foreclose on a property over manufactured fines, and the homeowner, an elderly widow, had settled rather than fight because she couldn't afford attorneys. "This is insane," I said. "It's criminal," Jennifer said. "But the laws are weak and enforcement is almost non-existent. That's why we organize. Strength in numbers. Media attention helps too." As if on cue, a news van pulled up. A reporter and cameraman got out. The reporter, a young woman with perfect hair and a microphone, made a beeline for me. "Mr. Vance, I'm Tiffany Wellington from KPNX News. We'd love to talk to you about your dispute with Pinewood Springs HOA." This was getting out of hand fast. I'd need to talk to my attorney first. "We're running a story on HOA overreach in the county. We've already interviewed 3 other homeowners with similar stories. Your case, with the attempted boat seizure and the restraining order, is particularly egregious. We'd love to get your perspective." I glanced at Don and Jennifer. They were nodding encouragingly. "Let me make a call," I said. Richard answered on the second ring. I explained the situation. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Normally I'd say no to media, but in this case, it might help. These HOA cases often get resolved faster when there's public pressure. Just stick to the facts. Don't let them bait you into saying anything inflammatory." I did the interview. Tiffany was professional, asking straightforward questions about what had happened. I showed her the video footage of the initial incident, the restraining order, even the spot where my tires had been slashed. The cameraman got shots of my property, the lake, the boat, the supposedly offending boat that was just sitting peacefully on my dock, looking completely innocuous. "What do you want people to know about this situation?" Tiffany asked. That HOAs need to operate within the law, I said. I'm not against HOAs in principle. If someone buys property in an HOA community and agrees to the rules, that's fine. But you can't just claim authority over properties that aren't part of your association. That's not how property rights work in America. The story aired that evening. By the next morning, it had gone viral locally. My phone started ringing with interview requests from other news outlets. The story hit social media, and suddenly I had people I'd never met commenting, sharing their own HOA horror stories, offering support. The Coalition Against HOA Overreach set up a legal defense fund for me, even though I hadn't asked for it. Donations started coming in. It was overwhelming and humbling. But with the increased attention came increased backlash from the HOA. Barbara Hendricks did her own interview with a competing news station, claiming I was a troublemaker who refused to follow community standards, that my property was a blight on the neighborhood which was rich, considering you couldn't even see my property from the HOA's development, and that I was waging a media smear campaign. Then, Blackwell and Associates, the HOA's law firm, filed a lawsuit. Not just against me, but against 10 other property owners, including Jennifer Watts and Don Carmichael, claiming we were engaged in a conspiracy to defame the HOA and seeking millions in damages. It was a SLAPP suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation, designed to silence critics through the cost and burden of litigation. Richard explained this in the emergency meeting he called with all the defendants. They're trying to bankrupt you into silence, he said. But SLAPP suits are illegal in this state if we can prove it's retaliatory. We're going to file a motion to dismiss and countersue for malicious prosecution. The legal battle kicked into high gear. Depositions, document requests, motions. It consumed hours of my time and thousands of dollars, even with the legal defense fund helping out. But I wasn't alone. The 10 of us named in the lawsuit bonded, sharing information, supporting each other. Discovery was illuminating. Through the legal process, we got access to the HOA's internal documents. What we found was damning. Email chains between board members discussing strategies to expand revenue streams by claiming authority over adjacent properties. Minutes from board meetings where they explicitly discussed targeting properties with valuable water access. Correspondence with Blackwell and Associates, where the attorneys advised them their expanded jurisdiction claim was legally shaky, but the firm would pursue it anyway if the HOA wanted to pay them. It was all about money. The HOA was running a deficit because their management company was bleeding them dry with fees. They'd decided to manufacture authority over non-member properties to extract fines and create a new revenue source. Richard and the other defense attorneys compiled everything into a motion to dismiss with prejudice and a counterclaim for RICO violations. Yes, RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, typically used against organized crime. Because what the HOA was doing met the definition, a pattern of fraudulent activity designed to extort money. The judge in the civil case, different from Judge Morrison, was named Harold Prescott. He was younger, early 50s, with a reputation as a hard ass who didn't like wasting judicial resources. The hearing on our motion to dismiss was scheduled for a Friday morning in early October. The courtroom was packed. All 10 defendants, our attorneys, representatives from the coalition, media, and a bunch of random citizens who'd been following the case. On the other side, Barbara Hendricks and the full 7-member HOA board, looking increasingly uncomfortable, plus Marcus Roth from Blackwell and Associates and 2 other attorneys from his firm. Judge Prescott read through the motions in silence for a good 10 minutes while we all waited. Then he looked up, his expression grim. I've reviewed the materials submitted by both parties. I've also done some independent research into HOA law in this state. What I've found is deeply troubling. He looked at the HOA's table. Counselors, your clients have engaged in what appears to be a systematic scheme to defraud property owners. The amended declaration claiming expanded jurisdiction has no legal basis. The lien threats, the harassment, the slap suit, all of it appears designed to extract money from people who have no legal obligation to pay you anything. Roth stood up. Your Honor, the HOA acted in good faith based on their understanding of sit down, counselor. I'm not finished. Good faith? Your own internal documents show you knew the legal basis was shaky. You pursued this anyway. That's not good faith, that's fraud. The courtroom was dead silent. The motion to dismiss is granted with prejudice. The SLAPP suit is dismissed. Furthermore, I'm awarding attorney's fees and costs to all defendants. I'm also referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. Finally, I'm sanctioning Blackwell and Associates for filing a frivolous lawsuit. You'll be paying a $50,000 fine to the court. Roth's face went white. The HOA board members looked like they might be sick. Barbara Hendricks started to stand, her face red, but one of the other board members grabbed her arm and pulled her back down. This court is adjourned. The gavel bang echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Outside, it was chaos. Media swarmed us. Tiffany Wellington got the first question. Mr. Vance, how does it feel to have won this case? It feels like justice, I said. But this shouldn't have happened in the first place. We need stronger laws to prevent HOAs from abusing their authority. Jennifer Watts stepped up to the microphone. This is a victory not just for us, but for every homeowner who's been targeted by predatory HOAs. We're calling on the state legislature to pass comprehensive HOA reform. The story exploded. National news picked it up. HOA tries to seize boat from property it doesn't own was the headline on multiple major websites. The video footage of the initial incident with Barbara and the tow truck crew went viral. Barbara became a meme, a symbol of HOA overreach and Karen behavior. The district attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Diaz, announced her office was opening a criminal investigation into the Pinewood Springs HOA board and Blackwell and Associates. The State Real Estate Commission also opened an investigation. Over the next 2 months, things moved quickly. The criminal investigation uncovered even more fraud. The HOA had actually filed false liens against 3 properties, including one elderly couple who'd paid $8,000 in manufactured fines just to clear the lien so they could refinance their home. The DA filed charges of fraud, extortion, and filing false documents against all 7 board members, including Barbara Hendricks. Blackwell and Associates was hit with ethics complaints and eventually disbarred. Marcus Roth lost his license to practice law. The individual HOA board members had different responses. 4 of them took plea deals, admitting guilt in exchange for probation and restitution. They claimed they'd just gone along with Barbara's leadership and didn't fully understand what they were doing was illegal. I didn't buy it, but the DA did. Barbara Hendricks, along with the 2 other board members, Donald Pritchard and Susan Kelly, refused to take deals. They went to trial in February. I had to testify. It was intimidating, sitting in a witness box with the defendants and their attorneys staring at me. But I just told the truth, described what happened, the attempted boat seizure, the harassment, all of it. The prosecutor, an assistant DA named Thomas Wright, walked me through everything methodically. Barbara's attorney tried to trip me up on cross-examination, suggesting I'd manufactured the whole conflict for publicity. But we had documentation for everything. Video footage, emails, the fraudulent notices, all of it. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Guilty on all counts for all 3 defendants. Sentencing was in April. Barbara Hendricks got 3 years in state prison, plus restitution of over $200,000 to the various victims. Pritchard and Kelly got 2 years each. All 3 were also permanently banned from serving on any HOA board. The Pinewood Springs HOA itself went into receivership. A court-appointed manager took over, dissolved the fraudulent expanded boundary claim, and refunded all illegitimate fines that had been paid. The HOA still exists for the 43 original properties, but it's under strict oversight now. As for me, things went back to normal, or as normal as they could be after being at the center of a viral news story and a criminal trial. I settled into a peaceful routine on my property. The boat stayed on my dock, uncovered, and nobody said a word about it. The Coalition Against HOA Overreach turned our case into a legislative campaign. By summer, the state legislature passed the Homeowner Protection Act, which included strict penalties for HOAs that attempt to claim authority over properties without recorded covenants, made filing false liens a felony, and created a streamlined process for homeowners to challenge HOA actions. I got calls and emails from homeowners around the country facing similar situations, asking for advice. I did what I could to point them toward resources and attorneys. Jennifer Watts and Don Carmichael became friends. We'd meet up every few months for dinner, comparing notes on ongoing HOA battles they were helping other people fight. My attorney Richard Yang sent me a final bill with a note. "Thanks for the most interesting case of my career. You're paid up." The legal defense fund had covered almost everything, and the attorney's fees awarded by the court covered the rest. One evening in late May, almost exactly a year after the initial incident, I was sitting on my dock with a beer, watching the sunset over my lake. Rex was sprawled next to me, snoring contentedly. The water was like glass, reflecting the orange and pink sky. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. My stomach tensed for a moment, old instincts kicking in, but then I read it. "Mr. Vance, this is Sarah Hendricks, Barbara's daughter. I wanted to apologize for what my mother put you through. I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry. She let power go to her head, and she hurt a lot of people. I hope you're doing well." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate the apology. I hope your mother uses her time to reflect and becomes a better person." "I hope so too." I set the phone down and looked out over the lake, my property, free and clear, no HOA, no drama, just peace. A fish jumped near the far shore, rings spreading across the water. Rex lifted his head, watching, then settled back down with a contented grunt. This was why I'd bought this place. Not to fight, not to be on the news, not to become some kind of property rights crusader. Just to have a piece of land where I could live quietly, on my own terms. The fight had been necessary, but it was over now. The bad actors were punished, reforms were in place, and hopefully fewer people would have to go through what I went through. I took a sip of my beer and smiled. Sometimes standing up for your rights means going to war, but victory, when it comes, tastes sweet. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deeper shades of purple and red. I sat there until full dark, listening to the frogs start their evening chorus, feeling the gentle breeze off the water. My property, my lake, my peace, and nobody, not Barbara Hendricks, not any HOA, not anyone, could take that away from me. The following weeks brought a sense of normalcy I hadn't felt in nearly a year. I dove back into my software consulting work, taking on new clients and finishing projects I'd had to put on hold during the legal battle. The rhythm of work, coffee on the dock in the morning, lunch breaks spent throwing a ball for Rex, felt luxurious in its ordinariness. But the ripple effects of the case continued. In June, I got a call from a documentary filmmaker named Michael Torres. He was working on a film about HOA abuse across America and wanted to feature my story as one of the central case studies. "Your case had everything," Michael said over the phone, his enthusiasm palpable. "Video evidence, a criminal trial, legislative reform. It's the perfect example of how individual citizens can fight back against institutional overreach." I was hesitant at first. I'd had my fill of media attention. But Michael convinced me that the documentary could help other people facing similar situations. We spent 2 days filming interviews on my property, going through the timeline, showing the locations where everything happened. The dock where I'd been sitting when Barbara and her crew arrived became a set piece. The gate where the coalition had protested was filmed from multiple angles. Michael even got interviews with Jennifer Watts, Don Carmichael, Deputy Chen, and Judge Morrison, who all agreed to participate. The documentary, titled Hostile Homeowners Fighting HOA Tyranny, premiered at a film festival in September and later aired on a streaming service. It was strange seeing my story dramatized with all the footage woven together, but the response was overwhelmingly positive. The documentary became a rallying cry for HOA reform movements in other states. I started getting invited to speak at property rights conferences and homeowner advocacy groups. At first, I declined most of them. Public speaking wasn't my thing, and I wanted my quiet life back. But eventually, I accepted a few invitations, figuring if my experience could help others, I should share it. The first conference I spoke at was in Phoenix in October. I was nervous as hell walking up to the podium, looking out at about 200 people in the hotel conference room. But once I started talking, telling the story, it came naturally. I described the shock of seeing that convoy coming down my road, the confrontation with Barbara, the escalating harassment, the legal battle, and finally, the criminal convictions and reforms. During the Q&A session, a woman in her 60s raised her hand. My HOA is trying to foreclose on my home over a fence they claim violates their rules. But the fence was there when I bought the house 15 years ago. What should I do? Document everything, I said. Get copies of all the HOA's correspondence, your property records, photos of the fence showing its age. Find a real estate attorney who specializes in HOA disputes, and don't pay fines or agree to anything until you've had legal advice. These organizations count on people being intimidated and just complying. Other hands shot up. A man in his 40s. Our HOA board won't let us see their financial records, but our fees keep going up. Is that legal? Depends on your state, but generally no. HOA members have a right to see how their money is being spent. You might need to demand an audit. If they refuse, that's a red flag that something shady is going on. Question after question, story after story. It was overwhelming, but also empowering. These were regular people, homeowners who'd worked hard for their properties, being pushed around by petty tyrants on power trips. After my talk, dozens of people came up to thank me, to share their stories, to ask for more specific advice. I exchanged emails with many of them, connecting them with resources and attorneys when I could. By December, the Homeowner Protection Act that had passed in my state was being used as a model for legislation in 6 other states. I testified before legislative committees in Colorado and Oregon, describing my experience and urging them to pass similar protections. The political process was slow and frustrating. Legislators asked good questions, but there was also pushback from the real estate industry and HOA management companies who saw the reforms as government overreach. The irony wasn't lost on me that these companies were complaining about overreach while defending HOAs that committed fraud and extortion. But momentum was building. The documentary, the news coverage, the fact that actual criminal convictions had resulted from my case, all of it created political pressure. By spring of the following year, Colorado passed its version of the Homeowner Protection Act. Oregon followed 3 months later. Meanwhile, back home, life settled into a comfortable pattern. I adopted another dog, a golden retriever mix I named Lucy, who became best friends with Rex. The two of them would swim in the lake on hot summer days, playing fetch with sticks I'd throw from the dock. I dated a bit, nothing serious. Went out with a woman named Taylor Wilson, a veterinarian from the next town over, for a few months. She was smart and funny, and we had good chemistry, but ultimately we were in different places in life. She wanted to travel, to live in a city eventually. I'd found my forever place right here on this lake. We parted as friends. My relationship with the local community improved too. Early on, some of my neighbors in the wider area had been standoffish. I think worried that my fight with the HOA would bring problems to everyone. But as the truth came out, as people realized the HOA had been the aggressor and was actually targeting other properties too, sentiment shifted. The guy who owned the property to the north of mine, a quiet rancher named Frank Morrison, stopped by one day in his pickup truck. "Just wanted to say thanks," he said. "That HOA sent me a letter last year claiming I needed to pay them fees. I told them to get lost, but after your case came out, I found out they'd been planning to target my property next. You probably saved me a lot of trouble." We became friendly after that, helping each other out with property maintenance, lending tools, that sort of thing. It felt good to be part of a real community, not a manufactured one with arbitrary rules, but an organic network of neighbors who respected each other's space and property rights. In August, I got an email from the state's Real Estate Commission. They'd completed their investigation into HOA practices statewide and were implementing new regulations requiring HOAs to carry insurance against board misconduct, undergo annual audits, and provide homeowners with clear dispute resolution processes. The email thanked me for my role in bringing these issues to light. It was gratifying to see systemic change happening, but also bittersweet. All of this progress had come because I'd been forced into a fight I never wanted. because Barbara Hendricks and her cronies had decided to try to steal my boat and intimidate me off property I legally owned. I thought about Barbara sometimes, sitting in a state prison somewhere, probably still convinced she'd been in the right. I didn't hate her, not anymore. I mostly felt sad for her. She'd let a little bit of power in a homeowners association corrupt her completely, and it had cost her everything. The other HOA board members who'd taken plea deals were serving probation and community service. I'd heard through the grapevine that Donald Pritchard had lost his job and gotten divorced. Susan Kelly had moved out of state. The four who'd taken plea deals early had mostly faded into obscurity. As for Marcus Roth, the disbarred attorney, I'd seen a news article about him working as a paralegal at some low-rent law firm, a spectacular fall from grace. Part of me felt bad for him too, but then I remembered how he'd knowingly filed a frivolous slap suit trying to financially destroy me and 9 other people just doing our jobs. He'd made his choices. Karma, it seemed, was real. By the time the second anniversary of the initial incident rolled around in May, I'd settled into something approaching wisdom about the whole experience. I'd been tested in ways I never expected, forced to stand up not just for myself, but for a principle, the fundamental right to be secure in your property without harassment or illegal interference. I'd learned that doing the right thing often requires sacrifice. Time, money, stress, privacy. I'd given up all of it to fight back. But I'd also learned that you're rarely alone in these fights. People like Jennifer and Don and the coalition, people I'd never met before, had stood with me because they believed in the same principles. And I'd learned that systems can change, laws can be reformed, bad actors can be held accountable. It takes work and courage and persistence, but it's possible. On the morning of that second anniversary, I sat on my dock with my coffee, Rex and Lucy sprawled beside me, and looked out over the glassy surface of my lake. The sunrise was spectacular, painting everything gold and pink. A great blue heron landed on the far shore, standing motionless in the shallows, hunting for fish. My phone was on silent inside the house. My email inbox could wait. The work projects could wait. Right now, this moment was perfect. I'd defended this place, this peace, and won. Not just in court, but in a larger sense. I'd proven that individual rights still mattered, that citizens could stand up to institutions that overstepped their authority, and that the system, for all its flaws, could still deliver justice when pushed hard enough. The boat, the innocent cause of all the chaos, bobbed gently at the end of the dock. I'd replaced the torn cover, more out of practicality than any desire to appease anyone. It looked good, clean and well-maintained, ready for the summer boating season. I planned to take it out later, cruise around the lake, maybe drop a fishing line. Simple pleasures earned through hard-fought peace. A text message notification buzzed faintly from inside the house. I ignored it. Whatever it was could wait. Right now, I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do, living free on my own land, subject to no one's rules but my own and the laws of the land that protected everyone equally. That was worth fighting for. That was worth everything it had cost. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist that hung over the water. Lucy got up, stretched, and padded down to the lake's edge for a drink. Rex followed, both dogs moving with the easy contentment of animals who knew they were home and safe. I smiled and took another sip of coffee. Life was good. Justice had been served, the bad guys had lost, and my boat was still sitting peacefully on my dock, right where it belonged. Word count 12,043.